Why you wouldn't survive life in ancient Greece. Introduction. The ancient Greeks were a hardy bunch. They had to be to survive in a world where the average life expectancy was just 35 years. But if you were to step into the shoes of an ancient Greek, would you be able to hack it? In this video, we will explore why you wouldn't survive life in ancient Greece. So watch the video until the end. Don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe. If you lived in ancient Greece and were a woman, you wouldn't have the right to vote. You also couldn't earn property or go to school. Women were not allowed to wear pants or even go barefoot as men did. And they weren't allowed to see plays or go near gymnasiums either. The only places where men congregated together were taverns and brothels and maybe battlefields. Also, faith healing was common in ancient Greece, and it was not a good way to treat an illness or serious injury. Faith healers often claim that they can cure diseases and injuries by the power of prayer. However, this practice is dangerous because there's no medical evidence supporting its effectiveness as a treatment for these conditions. There have been cases where children were harmed or even killed by faith healers who were attempting to treat their patients' illnesses with prayer instead of medicine or surgery, and those are just two examples out of many. The Greek language is a very complicated one, and unless you are fluent in it, you would not be able to communicate with the people around you. Furthermore, you would not be able to read or write in Greek, which would make it very difficult to get by in day-to-day life. If you were sick and couldn't get pregnant, it was time to find a new doctor. Women in ancient Greece often got pregnant when they were ill to cure their illnesses. Pregnancy was a sign of health and fertility, as well as youth and beauty. A woman with an infant bump would be seen as more beautiful than one who was old enough to have children on her own. Pregnancy also meant wealth. If a woman became pregnant while unmarried and therefore poor, she could use her pregnancy as an excuse for not marrying until she had given birth. This gave her time to save up money so that when she did marry, she could provide for herself better than most women at the time could afford to do alone. If you were born in ancient Greece, your life would be tough. You wouldn't get to play with toys or games. You'd have to focus on survival instead. You wouldn't be allowed to cry when you got hurt. All of these things were considered weak and could lead to future problems for Spartans who were raised in this way. So it's no wonder that there are so many stories about how Spartan children became perfect killers as adults. Cosmetics were often made from lead, arsenic, mercury, and other toxic ingredients. They were used to cover up symptoms of disease and make the body look good. Cosmetics were also used as a way to increase beauty. This is where the myth that Cleopatra had snakes in her hair comes from. But this practice was dangerous. If you weren't careful with what you put on your skin or into your body, like an excessive amount of cosmetics, it could cause problems with health and even death. If you were an ancient Greek boy, your parents probably spoke a different language than you. They might have spoken the same dialect of Greek as us today, but they didn't have any idea what we were saying because their language was so old and different from ours. If it wasn't for the fact that we know about these people now and can read their writings down through history, and even more recently, then none of this would be possible. It's easy enough to imagine how difficult it must have been for these people back then, especially if they had no understanding whatsoever about what was going on around them. If there wasn't anything written down by someone who would later become one of our heroes, like Aristotle or Plato, who both lived during this time period. If you were an ancient Greek athlete, you might have been convicted of cannibalism, not because they killed and ate people or anything like that, but because their body was so different from ours in terms of size and strength. They believed that eating raw meat made them stronger, so they would often eat unprocessed meats like beef, lamb, and mutton, as well as raw fish, which tastes pretty gross. Some even went so far as to drink blood from freshly slaughtered animals. If you were an ancient Greek moviegoer getting ready to see Hercules, you'd have to buy men's tickets no matter what gender you are. The Greeks were the first people to use the word cinema and invented glass blowing, the art of blowing glass, sundials, and steam engines, the latter two being used for scientific purposes at this time. They also invented the first computer games. If you lived in ancient Greece and got married, your father would give your husband a large dowry, a gift from him, and sometimes from other members of his family that would help him establish his new household. Even if you didn't survive, the Greeks created something that was even better than democracy. They created the idea of a government by the people that was separate from religion, and they did it by creating an army that was not under religious control. In fact, it's hard to imagine any country today having done this as well as Greece did in ancient times. The idea of government by the people has been around for some time now. We have had various forms of representative democracy since ancient times and maybe even before. But what makes this form different from any other? The answer lies in two things. Firstly, it's based on mutual respect between citizens. Secondly, and perhaps more importantly, it doesn't require faith or belief in anything outside yourself to hold on to your rights as an individual citizen within society. Piracy was a big problem in ancient Greece. Pirates were often from the islands of Crete and Sicilia, which made them hard to keep out of port. They would often attack merchant ships and then demand ransoms for their safe return home. Some pirates even served as mercenaries for other countries, which meant that they could be hired by anyone who had enough money to pay them off. Since the Greeks were an agricultural society, they were required to pay taxes on their crops and livestock. The government took all of this money and used it to pay its army, which was made up of mercenaries from other countries, like the Romans. The Greeks also had to pay taxes even if they didn't have a job. That's right, if your town was hit by an epidemic or plague, there would be no one left in charge at City Hall, so everyone had to go out into the fields and harvest what little food they could find before winter set in again. Maybe modern life has its advantages after all. Here are some of the benefits of modernity. If you're injured, medical treatment can range from simple bandages and aspirin to surgery, prescription drugs, and even transplants. It's hard to compare this to ancient Greece, where most people died from illness or injury before they reached age 20, if they lived that long. The internet allows us today to communicate with anyone in the world instantly, or at least within a few miles. If a friend or family member gets sick far away, you can send them money via PayPal or transfer their money through Venmo, which uses their phone number as identification. You could even send flowers. This wouldn't be possible until recently because there were no telephones. Now it's very easy thanks to smartphones and apps like Skype, which allow people who aren't physically close together anymore but still want or need contact with each other often enough so that sending each other messages isn't too expensive, involving shipping costs, etc. Conclusion: while the ancient Greeks were busy inventing democracy, they also invented a lot of other things. But there is one thing that we can learn from them. If you want to live long and healthy lives, make sure you're taking care of yourself. That means eating good food, exercising regularly, and not smoking cigarettes or using drugs like alcohol. And if possible, try not to get involved in any crazy religious cults. We hope you found this video interesting and informative. And if you have any questions or comments, we'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.